So this is the third installment of the Minds Fall Seminar Series 2024. So our speaker today is Dr. Magdalena Bak-Maier. So she's a neuroscientist. She invented the grid method. She's an author and a performance coach and much more, honestly. I guess she's kind of here in one capacity as the founder and managing director of Make Time Count. So she helps people achieve holistic productivity using the power of heart and mind connection. And she's going to talk to us today about doing well in your PhD with the grid approach. So with that, Magdalena, please take it away.
Lovely. So, hello everyone. And I just want to do two checks. Can you all hear me? If you can just do a thumbs up or something that lets me know you can hear me okay. Because yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you so much. I see three thumbs up, so that's really good. Yeah, welcome to people from wow, Spain, Toronto, Canada, Turkey. This is so exciting. Really glad to be here with you. And just by way of context, I want to say that, I came across this lovely initiative through sort of a Twitter, I think, post initially. And then I thought, well, I happen to have a tool and an approach that has been and continues to be really effective for people. So in my one-to-one practice, I support elite scientists mostly, but I also get involved with different universities in offering programs for students, for postdocs, for research fellows. But my one-to-one practice as a psychologist, I suppose, is mostly to support people who are, professors, lecturers, and really all the way out into the long end of the career spectrum in academia. And I suppose I probably want to start by saying that, the issues of doing well and what that means for our psychology, for our achievement, never go away. So whether you're in your 20s and you're doing a PhD, which is people here today, but also when you're gonna stay in academia or go to something else, performance never goes away. Really, we always think about how can we do well, and so it's been a few years since I've completed my PhD, but it has not been very long since I've completed my master's in mental health. And so, I've just kind of really sort of finishing off recovering from my master dissertation actually on burnout. And so in one way or another, I can probably tell you that grit has been incredibly helpful to me in keeping my health and work-life balance. And so I am really, really delighted to tell you a little bit about this today, and also to help you really take you maybe on a reflective journey to kind of set up some of the basics of how you could really put grit to use straight from this quick seminar. And then I'm hoping that, using perhaps the interactive chat, if you have questions as we go, or even if you want to pause and flag up, perhaps to Alison, if Alison, I can contract you to also keep an eye out, because I might miss questions since I only see three little windows on my screen. That would be really, really, really great. Let's get started. So I suppose, you probably will forgive me, but being a specialist in burnout and also in mental health, I really often start asking everyone who comes into my world about, using these little characters, which one would be you? Because what I have found is that, certainly during my PhD, I don't think I was really ever enjoying calm, having a sense of future. I think I got there after I did my Viper and defended and knew I had a job lined up. That would have been the first day that you'd see me in some sense of joy. Although I was probably already in a bit of anxiety because I was also moving countries, and that was, really, really big, sort of going into the unknown. I think I probably had some happy moments, like, when I got a cover journal paper, when things got accepted. But those were rare. Happy moments were like, oh yeah, I got great data. Like, I think these experiments will pay off. Yes. So, there were the blips of, oh, running around. Although sometimes not many people to share it with necessarily. Because everybody likes their own happy moment, So, and my PhD was probably a lonely venture. I think one of the things that probably has changed now in science is that there's much more collaborative work. I think when I was doing my PhD at Caltech, there was a very big pressure on really making sure your PhD was your work. And so it was just you against the gods of the universe, and the rest of the science field and kind of getting something done. So most of the time, you would see me be a sort of a plate spinner, trying to do multiple things, trying to sort of keep it together, if I can put it that way. I think I was tired and exhausted most of the time. A lot of my experiments required really, gruesome hours. I had to stay up till 2 in the morning. I've spent a lot of weekends in the laboratory, so there were many times when I was really the sort of gray little creature going, I've got nothing left to give. Uh, I need my holiday, which was like 1 week off. So, I mean, some of those things don't change, but I'm sharing this slide with you because I think it's really important that you identify what would be your joy and calm, that you identify what are your happy moments, and that, kind of like the key principle of the grid is balance. And the key principle of these figures is really that you know where you are and that you can access these different states. Because from a nervous system perspective, we would say that, we just need them all. It's not like it's really terrible to be exhausted. It's okay. I think if we did a lot of good work, it's fine to be exhausted sometimes. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to have a lot on and have multiple plates, and worry that nothing will fall down. But it's really key that we have and know how to balance it out. And I suppose, it's the balance bit that probably defines all of my work in terms of what I do, and certainly the grid. So I suppose the promise of the grid is that with a little bit of discipline and creative use of highlighters and paper, because it is a paper-based method, that we can achieve the more happy in the moment. I've got this in hand, and also perhaps the longer joy and calm that we want to have. So before I move forward, it would be absolutely fantastic if I could ask you just to maybe in the chat say kind of where are you? Are you, the gray, the blue, the purple, the red, or the yellow? So if we play, I don't know, colorful M&Ms, maybe we can figure out, what have we got in the room with us today? Oh, I see one blue. Hello, hello. Oh, grayish, purplish, blue, purplish. Okay, purplish. Happy spinning plates, red, purple. Okay, cool. Okay, thank you so much. It gives me a little bit of a sense. All right. Well, wherever you are, don't worry. I hope that some things will become better. So, because a lot of my approach really uses, the power of self-reflection, and also, working with scientists now, I really see how useful it would have been for me to be asking myself some of these questions earlier on that perhaps no one asked. So I added them into these slides because I think they are really, really important. So how come I'm doing a PhD? I think, I never honestly sat down with that question. I think if I did, I'm not sure I would have stayed. uh, so I think, it's like, or perhaps the opposite of that is just the question, if I was not doing this, what else would I be doing? And my answer to that was that if I wasn't doing a PhD, I would have been an artist. And so it was kind of an interesting way of this juxtaposition of balance of the scientific mind, the engineering mind, and then the more artistic mind. And now I feel like I'm a writer, I'm an artist, I get to work with people. So I actually am doing my work feels like art, but it's actually science based. So it kind of eventually got there. But it's good to ask that question. The second one that I think I'd offer you is what is my PhD really about? And what I mean by this is that my PhD was about the curiosity of how the brain's formed, how it develops, and so on. But it's not so much about what it is that I'm doing in my PhD, but really about what sort of questions am I asking? And I really want to use this opportunity to address you and anyone else who will listen to this webinar to really invite you to think about this, because if I was doing my PhD again today and thinking about the people I support, I think some PhDs are stronger than others and they open up more roads than others. So, for example, if my PhD is really about me developing some good engineering skill sets, because I'm going to go, that's great. And then I know what that's about. But if my PhD is here to set me up for a career for a Nobel laureate, I might be needing to ask some really important key questions that are just little gems. And so I think that it's almost like as if I feel like a lot of programs could really benefit from having an induction around a PhD, like before you start your PhD. Like, what is that PhD really going to be about and how will it serve you? So I think that's a really good question to ask, is what sort of questions am I asking here and why? What is really good about them? And then the third question that I know I certainly never asked, and I know many people I meet also have never asked, which is what's after the PhD? So, sort of like, what does the PhD serve? So I remember being, an undergraduate researcher and meeting people from industry and saying, oh, my master's is serving my promotion. Or, some people would say, well, I'm going to get a PhD because if I get a PhD, I'll get a more senior role. Or I want to start, a biotech company. But I really admire people who have that clarity about their future career direction, because I think you have more chances during a PhD to do good work that will actually support you towards being that yellow M&M, which is to kind of have a little bit more safety towards where you're going to be going. And then question 4 and 5, I think, are absolutely key to what seems like an epidemic in mental health and stress and burnout in higher education and research in general, which is who is my support? And my parents didn't really grasp the concept of a PhD. I think they kept asking me all the way through it, like, what is it that you're doing, and why are you not like doing something much more sensible? So I wouldn't say they were my go-to support. And I was on the other end of the coast, so I grew up in New York City. I went to California. I was far away from my kind of network and support network, and it felt quite isolating, actually. I certainly know as a migrant that for many international students, you can sometimes be in places where you're away from your family, you're away from your friends, and there's a lot on, so you've got a lot to deal with. So really starting to think about who is your support. Have you got a local community of people that get you? Have you got, friends? Have you got something else that can really offer you that support? That's really, really important. And you'll see that in the grid. And then how often do I take time to reflect on my path? Sounds like a really kind of woo-y question, who maybe has time. But I think that I was very lucky because when I was doing my PhD, I think coaching kind of started to come up on the scene a bit like yoga in California. And we ended up having a coach come to Caltech for a day and offer us this evening to our program and made us think about, how are you feeling? What is this about? What do you need? And I remember thinking, wow, I wish I was asking that when I started. And that was really cool. And I think that's true at every point. So I would encourage you to sort of think about how consciously are you moving through this PhD experience, because PhD is a marathon. It's a long journey, and it's a journey into the unknown. So there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of questions, a lot of things that don't necessarily always go to plan. So those are my questions. And then I suppose I want to share this slide with you, just to kind of almost normalize the struggle. I think during COVID, I was asked by some academics to run some PhD programs to support PhD students, because I think especially COVID made it so hard, for many people. But I think it kind of revealed something that has been true all the time, is that it is hard. It just is hard. And so this was from, kind of our consistent survey that we've done, which is, what is the struggle really about? Which is basically a lot of things all at once, kind of a bit like the film. Uh, and then the impact of that is really kind of difficult stuff, right? Like it hits us mentally, it hits us emotionally, it's physically gruesome, and it can risk what effectively, I often see on Twitter streams, which is a great deal of harm, and even potentially trauma, which of course, being in mental health, like, is the other side that I kind of want to, of course, as an advocate, try to eliminate. So what are the aids in all of this? Like, how do we find, if we're at sea, how do we find these safety rafts? And I think time management, is definitely one thing, although time management is many things, I would say. But certainly focus aids, like staying focused, is actually becoming increasingly harder. So I think training focus, is really important, especially in science. But then anything that reduces anxiety, and as I said to you, the days I was happy, so the days I was the red M&M, was the days I got results. So I know when I talk to people, there's nothing as positive to keep you good and sweet except for results, because results give you confidence that it's okay. They're kind of like currency, a little bit like money you pay for rent or something. I mean, it's really real. But there's also things like reassurance, and that's not to be treated lightly. And you won't get reassurance if people don't know you, if you don't have relationships, if you haven't been able to reach out to people to have those connections to keep your nervous system, if I can put it that way, regulated. And practical mentoring. So I think, I remember being given mentors, and if I'm honest, I think their intention was good. But I didn't really get much out of that because I felt it was too generic. And what I really needed was incredibly practical, skill-based mentoring. So I would be inviting you to do that, and to also use the grid approach to kind of develop that network of people. So let me get onto the grid. And by the way, I called it the grid because as a kid, I used to have, kind of quadrile notebooks, and there was a grid to keep me neat. And I thought, oh well, a 2x2 matrix is a sort of a grid. So there you go. That's the name. Not much cleverness in that, but the basic principle. And I think for those of you, who like principles, you will see that principles are kind of good because they are a bit like little anchors that keep us steady, but at the same time provide incredible flexibility to not really sacrifice our personality or the way we are or how we prefer things, or how our life works. And that's kind of what the grid does. So the grid is a method for staying in well-being, for getting results, being productive, and effectively developing personal leadership. But it's also a framework and a tool. And basically, what it has is, at its core, it's a piece of blank paper that you've divided into 4 quadrants. One for your personal life, one for your PhD or your work, one for self-care, and one for careers. And the premise of the grid approach is that if you can balance those four quadrants, a bit kind of like a table you would have in a kitchen, you kind of want four legs that are roughly even so that it's, you've got a good surface. And what that means is that when you start thinking this way, you will be able to support your well-being far better, and your agency and your focus and so on. So, in positive psychology, we have this model called PERMA that says that when we get to feel positive emotions, when we experience motivation or that drive, when we feel connected to people, when we have purpose and meaning, and we get results, we become happy people. Now, I don't know whether we have to be happy all the time, but I certainly think that grit can help you get there. And grit can also help you recover from stresses because it can take the nightmare in your head that's like, I'm not getting anywhere. It's terrible. No one's seeing my work. I have no personal life and I have no sleep, which means like you're the gray M&M kind of a bit more towards going, hold on, things are not that bad. And the way you can do that is that the framework of the grid beautifully lends itself to doing like a post-it note day grid. So you can kind of go, what's the little things I could do today to help me balance? So basically calming the nervous system. Or you can take it into the macro big scale and sort of, meta level scale and say, what are my life goals? I'll have a cool house and start a business and get married and get a dog and, live in Hawaii and, work in this way and have this kind of career. So, and everything in between. So it will flex the time while keeping basic principles. And I think that is why it's really quite effective, because as someone who has moved to a country as a kid, I didn't really have a lot of agency in some of the early aspects of my life, but it's made me be a stickler for giving people their agency back or helping people rediscover it. And I feel like the grid does this really beautifully, and it does it for people of all ages. So, we haven't tried it with like high school kids so far, although I think one person in Sweden is doing that at the moment. But certainly for PhD, for professional, for even the retired person who wants to think about, do I still fancy doing some work? It always kind of brings you back into this. So we have a little grid manifesto on our website. We kind of want people to sort of go, hey, I can, through balance, have a much better and safer and more well-being life than I would without it. So I will share with you a link to this site. This is kind of grid in action for a student that you can see. And I don't know if you can recognize the big lines of the kind of four quadrants, and then the kind of setup of, how this person is working with the grid, which I think this is a monthly grid there. And I would say, I wouldn't be sharing this tool without saying to you that it's been tried and tested, and it is highly effective. So we've made few movies with people who are head of department, lecturer, academic, non-academic, student, ADHD student, all sorts of different people. And I suppose the thing that makes it work is if you like pen and paper. We have had few people who try to put this onto a computer, but until we are kind of in the matrix and our computers are these interactive 3D things with awesome screens where we get to move stuff around, the time it takes to do this on a computer is wasted, in my view. But also from a mind-body perspective, when you write things in hand, you touch into your inspiration and you think in flow. So this is why, I teach the method using pen and paper, and I think pen and paper is still, really, really good. So I want to spend some time to really take you through 3 activities that I think will help you. But I'll just quickly go through the benefits. So as you can hopefully appreciate already, there's a structure and an organization to the grid that begins to kind of like be like a Marie Kondo organizing your bedroom type of thing, where things are no longer in chaos. Like things start to have form. We can set those bigger goals. We can start to set daily tasks, and things start to achieve like doability. It kind of becomes more clear and more real. The short-term task feature of the grid. So, if you're doing a day grid, you wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm going to write a paper." You would say, I will. Every single activity is defined in task form, and what we mean by that is that a task is something I will have to complete within the 90 minutes. So we never go longer than 90 minutes because there's a lot of really good research about sort of this rhythm that we have for creativity around our brains needing to take rest. So this is why we do it in task form. And also this means that, if you wrote on a day list and said, I have this paper that I want to write, and you said, well, today I'm going to work on one little part of the figure for that paper. And you spend an hour or 90 minutes doing that and you finish it, you will get achievement. And that means that neurologically, your reward system is going to go, I'm a success. I'm moving forward. This is a good thing. So, the health, balance, and well-being aspect is also really key, as I will show you, because, if you really kind of maximize one area, but you do it at a cost to everything else, like you give up your friends, you give up healthy habits, just because you need your PhD, you can get yourself into trouble. And so grid structure prevents this. It's made so that you can sort of balance it a little bit better. And some of the people in the academic field now are really kind of getting curious about this tool because of the self-care emphasis. So, I've put self-care as one whole quadrant, and you would think, gosh, that's huge. But if you think about it, how can you do well if you're bleeding through your socks? If you're really like dragging yourself behind, like you're not going to do well. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do silly stuff, and you're going to be grinding through and not really being effective. So actually, self-care becomes this invisible factor that is really, really important to address. I think I said enough about flexibility and adaptability. The visual aspect of it and the concreteness is so important because we use this lovely tool called the highlighter. So I have, my multiple highlighters that when you do things, you highlight them. And as you see this color, you starting to get this beautiful feedback. It's like real biofeedback to your whole system of going, wow, I'm doing this, so I'm creating. Two, I'm doing it, and there's balance between these bigger quadrants, or I'm getting a lot of work done. So there's a kind of reassurance to you about, wow, this is working. I'm it's okay. Which means that when you're having the occasional bad day, it's not a problem because you have something to come back to. And so there's a huge encouragement of kind of self-coaching benefit to this approach because you can kind of, stay on top of it by yourself. And I will certainly share with Alison some more direct links to our blogs because we've had some people who, have taken this approach and have written us a piece about how it's helped them so that we can, share those with you. So the basic introduction in a kind of practical space that I think you will now be quite familiar with is that we always have just one piece of paper. This could be your diary with days. This could be a post-it note. This could be a big whiteboard if you're lucky enough to have one of those. But basically, we start off by looking, okay, what's happening outside the lab or outside my professional PhD space, and that's really important to stay on top of. And then how do I keep myself well? So these are the questions we would ask. And then what I get done at work. So, what am I working towards? What am I actually producing? And then career-wise, how am I supporting my professional future? So the reason why these are so important is that, for example, I often think that we can get caught in that momentary kind of myopia of like going, okay, I'm just doing my PhD, I'm doing my PhD. But for example, you might forget that you do need to build a network of people that will know about your work, that will open up doors into the next steps. And then you can kind of get caught off guard where you don't have those relationships later on that are really important because you weren't thinking about that. But within the grid, you can actually think about both of them, or for example, like going to a conference, which is a career development opportunity. You might do a lot of great work, but never take the time to think about how do I get the most out of going to a meeting. So that's why we separate the work and the career separately, because the things that are basically on the right, self-care and career, I have found in my work when I developed this approach were energy restoring. They were things that actually gave the nervous system energy and kind of gave you a spark. And if you think about it, when you go to a career like conference, for example, when you get a next step, when you get your letter that you got a fellowship, you get this boost, you get this really nice feeling, and it makes all that struggle on the left worth it. you know but if you don't, you build up resentment, you kind of build up like, oh, no one sees me, it's all so hard, I'm not getting anywhere. And then the stuff on the left starts to become toil and a burden, and a lot harder. So, what I thought we could do today in the time we have is, first of all, I'd like to invite you. We're going to do three things in those three green bars. We're going to look at overall balance so we can see whether we've got something to address that is really like macro level. Then I'm going to invite you to think about key goals, and talk through how we could then turn that into a kind of daily or weekly grid. And then I want us to kind of really support the mental health and physical health agenda, to use the grid framework to map resources you have to support you. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go through them fairly quickly, but the first one is really easy. Somewhere on a piece of paper, I'd like you to, sort of write out life, self-care, PhD, and career. And what I'd like you to do is to simply notice, how do you divide the land in a way that is not how you want it to be to start with, but literally how it is at the moment. So, where is the line? So if this was, an actual piece of paper, um, where would this line be? So, I remember when I was doing my PhD, my life was tiny. Like my PhD was most of the stuff, right? My self-care, I mean, I kind of drew it this way here, was really tiny. I did the basics, like I showered, and I ate. My career, I actually honestly didn't think about it. I think for the first 2 years of my PhD, I kind of just knew that there were postdocs, and that was a step ahead of me. And that's about it. I mean, I knew there were professors because clearly they were around. Um, but when I think back now, I think if I had shifted those lines a little bit more, and kind of redrew them, it might have been a better experience. And I got kind of lucky because I had a kind of professor who ended up in our lab from England, and he really liked my work, so we kind of started to work together. So I kind of started to kind of go, oh my God, I have this contact now in London. You know what I mean? So that sort of stuff. And then, if I'm really honest, like my self-care was so poor, I ended up getting really ill. So then I needed to go and see a doctor and do some yoga on a regular basis. And I was like, oh my God, yoga is so cool. It really helps you chill out. I took up cooking classes to kind of really zone out for a while, which became actually really fun because I could bake some really cool stuff for the lab as well. So I hope you're kind of getting a sense of this. But I just want to give you a minute. I'm going to just stop talking, give you a minute to draw yours and draw, how is it now? So this is a really important question that I don't think I've included. Have I included it here? Whoops. How is it now? How would I draw the lines now as they are? And then maybe with just a dashed pencil, see if you could draw, if I had it the way that would really serve me, how would the lines look? Okay? Because that is already such a beautifully clear goal for you to start to think, how can I shift what I do, how I do it each day to help me add more safety, add more well-being. So I'll write those questions in there. So okay, so that's exercise 1. And I just want to really make the point that, by the way, this need not be a Georgian window. And a Georgian window in England is, this beautiful window that has every single bit be the same. That is not true. What is important is that you have it the way you need it to be while managing your well-being. Okay. So they're not meant to be all the same, but they are meant to have enough in them that it works. So I will move to the second exercise. So now imagine that day to day we do stuff, right? But we can be quite reactive. Like I do stuff that comes through my mailbox. I do stuff that my boss tells me to do. I do stuff that I feel I owe people. So, but what about like if I had somewhere in my office a mega grid that told me line by line and said, Magdalena, you are trying to get 3 goals for self-care. You're trying to hit the gym 2 times a week. You're wanting to get like reasonable amount of sleep so that you stay okay, and you want to I don't know, go to the doctor once and get a checkup so you're all right, or maybe have a holiday that you really really enjoy. And now notice that if I have those goals and I start to look at my diary of 12 months, I can start to put in tasks to say, ooh, I can hit all of those. Are you with me? Because I can kind of go through that big plan and start to merge it and say, yeah, this is totally achievable because I can put it back into my activity. And I can have reminders to make sure that everything happens. And of course, if we don't have that, what will happen instead is that only the work stuff or whatever dominates will happen. And so we will lose balance by not having that. Okay. So my invitation to you after the workshop today or this webinar is to really sit down and spend 10 minutes with this and think about, you might be in your last year of PhD and you might be thinking, gosh, I've got to start to think about where am I going to live and, whatever. So it will vary between everyone. And that's why I think it's good to do on your own, or maybe grab a friend. And then you can explain the grid to someone else and be my champion. So that will be, really, really wonderful as well. Okay, so this brings us really to the last activity, really, which is resources. So, and I think I do want to give everyone a couple of minutes before we have some questions about really mapping what are your resources and what already works? Because, so much of life we spend thinking about what doesn't work. In fact, we're kind of mostly trained to think about, oh, I'm not looking the way I want. Oh, I've got this conflict. My sister isn't calling me. All the kind of, right, which kind of grinds us down. But what I want you to do is to really start thinking about, what do you already do that really helps you be a yellow M&M? However often you're doing it. Maybe you listen to your favorite music. Maybe, you have an extra activity, like rock climbing or something. Who knows? But there are things that you go, I've got stuff here that you can list. And the reason why I want to support you in making this list is that, imagine somewhere in your office or in your diary, you should have these two lists. The big goals on the one bit. So every time you reach one of those goals throughout the year, you can highlight them and feel safe that you're getting it. It's okay. If you're not, you can go ask for help. Equally, the resources is like your memory list to go, when things get in trouble, I know, like, oh, I do have a mentor. I do have someone to ask, if I was writing a fellowship application or my first draft of a paper. There are things here. Oh, I have a conference I really, really want to go to. And I thought about it. So that you can sort of start to see, what are your support, maybe you have a really good best friend that you haven't spoken to for a while, but that person is your go-to person. Maybe you have a grandma that gets it all, and helps you keep safe and good. So it's really thinking about really appreciating and gratitude for the things you already have. But it also allows you to start to add to this list. So, for example, you could go, oh gosh, I don't have so many things. Maybe I want to have a hobby. What hobby would it be? Something that would take me away and help me to really just leave my work behind for an hour. Uh, you know, Maybe I don't have a future plan, so maybe I'll go to a workshop on this so I can move that along, right? So notice how you can add resources into this map, that I think will be a good way to keep you safe and sound. Okay, so I think that within the webinar today, that's if we can get those three things under our belt by end of today, at some point, then I think you guys will be slightly better off. And I think what they will give you are the tools to then start to organize your day using this framework to say, okay, if today I would do something for my personal life that is important, like maybe paying my gas bill, or something nice like going outside for a run, then I can put a tick box in each of these quadrants. And remember that one of the things that we want to do from a habit building perspective is that even if I'm not doing something for my career in a day, the fact that I thought about it and said no meant that my mind went there anyways. And so that is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop more mindful, balanced way of being, that is kind of our routine. And then even when we have a lot to do, over time we can start to see that, like, if you were to look at those bigger goals or even monthly goals, or your tasks, you might find that all the tasks that are in this area that you wrote out are never getting highlighted and completed. So they're all empty, but everything here is being highlighted. Or you might find out that, some things are highlighted all the time and some things never get highlighted, which starts to tell you that, ooh, maybe there's a little bit of resistance. Maybe you need some skills there, or you need some more support. So that's basically how I think grid can help you in your PhD. And I want to leave at least a few minutes for questions. But I will leave you with this. So we run a monthly newsletter that you can join through this link. So you can join our community. And our newsletter is really kind of devoted to just giving you little prompts once a month to keep you balanced, basically, to keep you doing well. And you can sort of sign up, I think, using this QR code. That's what Emma in my team says. We haven't tried it yet, so if it doesn't work, you can just use that that main link.